back to the Villa Filler podcast. I'm here, as always, with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, how you doing, buddy?
Good, mate. Good, mate. You?
I'm doing good, man. It's been...
just got to give you the birthday boy, no less. Happy birthday yesterday, mate. I've got to do it on air as well.
Thank you, man. I was hoping that, the best birthday present of all would have been a player standing in the Villa shirt at Villa Park being announced, but it wasn't to be. I had a great birthday. Thank you very much for the shout out there, Dan. Before we get into the main, subjects that we're going to speak about on the podcast, we'd just again really like to thank you for all the support we've received. We hit 2,000 subscribers the other day, which is absolutely mad. So stay tuned for more podcasts throughout the season. We've had news on the fixtures. Obviously, I'm sure you'd have all seen them by now. So that is something that we will be talking about in this podcast, and transfer rumours as well, because they are coming in thick and fast. And it's a player that we've spoke about before on the podcast, and I've written an article about. But we'll get into that. First of all, there's been a bit of an uproar about the fixtures. I say uproar. I mean, there's always something going on Villa Twitter, isn't there, Dan, in regards to, there being some form of meltdown and whatnot. But, the fixtures came out, and we're supposed to play Manchester City at home first. Wasn't meant to be because of how far they got in Europe. Wasn't far enough, but it still warranted them a few weeks off. So we will be facing Sheffield United at home as our first fixture, which is a lot nicer than coming into Manchester City away straight away. It's not something you want to do. You want to, last season we had Bournemouth. Bournemouth was our first game, wasn't it, Dan?
Yeah.
So, and we lost that. So I guess there's no easy game, but you prefer the easier game on paper. So, looking at the fixtures, I guess we'll start with your thoughts on Sheffield United, Dan, to be honest.
Yeah, it's one of those where look, it's going to be a very hardly contested Premier League season. The quality that's in the league is so vast. Every team seems like a difficult game, and I've spoken about this on the podcast before. Just in the teams coming up in Leeds and West Brom and the like, they're just harder games. You'd rather be going to Watford and Norwich away than Leeds and Baggies. Craven Cottage has fared well for us in the past, and I think Fulham will be down there again this season. And unfortunately for Sheffield United, they're a side that I see. I'm not saying they're going to get relegated. I'm not making that call or anything like that. But we saw just how important the momentum was for Sheffield United as a team, and that was what was carrying them. Their home fans and the feel-good factor around the club. When that was cut out during lockdown and it came back and the fans were put out and it was just down to 11 against 11, momentum excluded, just who was better on the day. Sheffield United had a really poor time. And so, I don't think they're going to be finishing the top half again this season. It could be a little bit cruel. I don't think it would have been as hard at opening game to the season as it would have been last season. But for this season, it's definitely easier than a trip to the Etihad, as you say, mate. And then we've got that trip to Craven Cottage, I believe, straight after.
Yeah, it's winnable games, you want to say straight away. Every game should be a winnable game. And I think people will look at that interview that Purslow and Dean Smith did, where Purslow was like, well, Dean's going to want to win every game. And, that's always going to be the case. So I guess, we can't look too much into this kind of stuff because, as you say, it's whoever turns up on the day. And as we've seen during lockdown, Villa were great. We really were. I don't. We can't undersell how good we were since returning. I think the only game where I thought, "Oh my God, we're terrible," was the Wolves game. To be honest, I think you can go through the podcasts and see that for yourselves. But Villa, we've got to give them credit for that. They managed to stay up, albeit by goal difference. But we saw a very different Villa from the end of lockdown. So, as you said, that will have some form of effect on other sides. We may even drop off, so you never really know. Hopefully though, with the addition of a few players, this can change. Obviously we have been doing these transfer rumour podcasts for you guys, keeping them a bit shorter. You guys seem to have really been liking them, so obviously throughout the summer we are going to be talking about these players, and we'll start with it's funny actually, because I mentioned in the podcast about Weston McKennie, and I wrote an article about him, and we've ended up being linked with him. I'm no means in the know. This was me picking out a player that I thought would fit the system perfectly. And then as well, if you go back to the last podcast, I put Dan on his toes and asked him who he would sign. And who was it you picked, Dan, from Valencia? It was a Valencia player, though, which is important.
Yeah. It was just any of the Valencia squad, really. And look what's happened.
And we've been linked with Jasper Cillessen. So he's a player who we will talk about first, being a goalkeeper. Villa have been linked with a plethora of attackers. And I don't think it's such a bad thing that we're finally seeing a link like this. Cillessen is a very good keeper. I wrote an article on him today for a different site, which I'll link in the description below. Just having a kind of bit more of an in-depth look at his career and comparing what he's like with, our current goalkeeping options. I compared him with Heaton and Nyland because they're the two, who are more likely to feature. Pepe Reina was included in that comparison. I don't think we're going to go back in for Pepe. Especially if you can get someone like Cillessen in relatively cheap. Didn't include Jed Steer in it because he hasn't really played enough, so it would have been unfair for me to judge 14 minutes against Wolves where he conceded one goal and then got injured. But, Cillessen he's an interesting one because he's not actually played a lot of football. He's played 260-odd games throughout his whole career, including international games, which, he's been to the 2014 World Cup. If you guys remember that iconic quarter-final round against Costa Rica, I believe it was. Very good Costa Rica team. And Cillessen actually kept a clean sheet for 120 minutes and was then subbed off by Louis van Gaal for Tim Krul, which, seems to be the weirdest decision ever in football at the time. But he was vindicated by the fact that that Krul made 2 saves in the shootout. Dan, you've watched a lot of La Liga, probably more than me. I like to watch a bit. Cillessen, upon his move to Barcelona, I think people expected big things, but he came around the same time as ter Stegen. Am I right in saying?
Yeah. So he's a keeper who played a lot of his career for Ajax, had those big games at the World Cup and everything like that, and it earned him a transfer to Barcelona. And he was playing second fiddle at the time, but Barca had this really sort of weird trident of Claudio Bravo was in the mix at the top for one season of it before he's moved to Man City. Cillessen was in there, and they had one keeper for La Liga, one keeper for the Cups, and one keeper for the Champions League. And the keeper for the Cups was Jasper Cillessen. So if you go to his Wikipedia, it tells you he made 5 appearances for Barcelona. Those are in the league. He played mostly in the Cup. And then he was involved in a swap deal for Neto, who went and became second fiddle at Barcelona, and Cillessen's gone to Valencia, where he's played a bit of football, but obviously Valencia been in the Europa League and stuff this season, so he's been involved in European competition, and he's played a little bit more, a few more games there. He's 31 years old, so I think what that is we really saw in Pepe Reina, especially during lockdown, how much it benefits us having an older keeper behind such a young defence. I've always been Oyan Nyland's biggest fan on this podcast, sometimes to my own detriment, but he's redeemed me a little bit this season. And no, I think we saw it with Heats before he got injured. I think we saw it with Pepe. Just that young back four really seem to be a lot more at ease when they've got a 30-plus-year-old keeper behind them. And so I think Cillessen provides that. They've spoken before about the need for experience in this team. Cillessen, World Cups, La Liga, Eredivisie, European, he's playing the Champions League, the Europa League. If he's good enough for Barcelona, mate, then he's good enough for the Villa.
Yeah, I guess it's that same argument that we made with Goulam, really, isn't it? Who are we to turn our nose up at someone like that? And upon comparing statistics in terms of average goals conceded per 90, pass completion, very similar to Tom Heaton, to be honest. And I think stats like that, Tom Heaton conceded 33 goals for Aston Villa in his 20 appearances I think he made before the injury on New Year's Day, which doesn't cover him in a lot of glory. And I think it's unfair to judge him purely based on those kind of stats because, as I say, it was a completely different Villa. We were playing very nice attacking football, but it wasn't getting us anywhere, and the defence was far too leaky. So, I think stats like that is kind of difficult to judge some keepers on, because Tom Heaton, I think if you'd ask anyone, is only playing 20 games for the club, is definitely one of the better goalkeepers we've had over the last decade, even 2 decades, comfortably. And I think it's that kind of, you were talking about the 3 goalkeepers that Barcelona had there. They're 3 very good goalkeepers. Now, of course, they were assigned their roles in terms of which competitions they were playing, but having good goalkeepers like that is genuinely the best kind of selection dilemma you can have at a football club. I think decide, which goalkeeper can if you can rely on all of them to keep a clean sheet, then that's the best problem you can have, really, isn't it? So I think if you can add someone like that for a relatively low fee to compete with Tom Heaton, even Orjan Nyland and Jed Steer as well. As I said, I didn't include Jed in the article, which will be in the description below, but he is a fantastic keeper. So, adding that kind of experience, as you say, I think it's just another great thing to do, and I think Villa should look at it. I think on these podcasts, Dan, we've not really sat there and gone, nah, that one ain't it, really, which I guess is, I know that we've not signed anyone yet, but it's all pointing towards Villa being in the right direction in terms of people we're recruiting.
Yeah, no, definitely, mate. And this makes such a big difference from last summer. We were players we were linked with, and I don't want to sound like Mystic Meg here, like nothing like that, because I ended up getting on board with the transfer. But I'd actually watched considering where he came from and the fact he's Egyptian, I'd actually watched a fair bit of Trezeguet before he came to Villa. I watched the first time I really got into the AFCON, the last time it was on. Egypt's obviously are one of the better sides, led by Salah, and they've got a very decent side, a lot of faces that you recognise. And I watched a lot of Egypt's games, Elmo obviously, and I watched them at the World Cup and stuff like that. I spoke to a few different people, Sam Tai, and so far I messaged him about Trezeguet, and he said he's a bit one-footed. He tries a lot of pretty audacious things. Most of the times they won't come off. Sometimes they will. He's a little bit hit and miss. And from what I had seen and from what I've been hearing, wasn't really too keen. And there was a few transfers like that where I was like, never heard of Marvelous Nakamba. Do you know what I mean? Like, target a bit unproven for that fee. But it's nice that this summer it's like, yeah, that looks good. That looks good. It's clear to see that Mark Harrison's doing a lot with the under 23s. I'm really sorry to the lad that's just signed. I have the names stick in my mind, but we've just picked up a 16-year-old from Exeter who they've said hasn't really played a great lot, but they've heard a lot about. And if he's going to be putting in some shifts for us, and it's nice to just see that the recruitment seems to be carefully selected. The player profile seems to be, as I said, older in the right positions, like keeper. In defensive positions where we were looking at, supposedly looking at Gulam and stuff like that. So in those key positions where we need experience, there is that. But then in those midfield players, which we're going to surely talk about in a moment, there's the fresh younger faces. There's your Ollie Watkins, your Ben Rahmas, and your Rashikas in attack. So you've got the younger hunger in those positions where you need it, but the experience where you want it to. And yeah, so far, mate, every link I've welcomed, and if every link that we've had comes off, then we're going to have one hell of a squad come the first game of the season.
It's going to be quite top heavy, isn't it? Surely, with all the strikers we've been linked with. But I mean, there's absolutely no complaints from me in terms of what we're hearing. If we get any of that, it is a completely different story. But we can hope. I think. We'll move on to McKennie again. We spoke about McKennie in the podcast, I think two podcasts ago, and he's one that he wasn't linked with Villa as we mentioned at the top of the podcast. We were saying just before, I think that the bid from Southampton has made Villa go, okay, well, we need to act. We've not really signed anyone, but I don't think we can be too critical of that because not many Premier League clubs again have done that much business yet, and I think we're going to see so many deals after whoever loses 3 games in a row when the season starts and the transfer window is still open, is going out and signing 5 players. That's absolutely happening. So, I think we've got to try and be patient, but with someone like McKennie, I don't think we can afford to be. If Southampton have had this bid, if Villa can match it, I don't see any reason why McKennie would favour a move to Southampton over Villa. Hopefully, Wes Edens can pull some strings. You just got to look at what Edens has done with the Bucks. You look at Giannis over there. Some would argue far too good to be playing for Milwaukee. Which you can make the comparisons there with Jack Grealish. But they've really managed to build something special around him at the Bucks. Not a playoff winning side by any means, but certainly pushing for that. And that's the kind of ambition that you've got to have at a club like Aston Villa. And for me, as for all the reasons I've already listed in my article I did on Weston McKennie, which will again be in the description if you guys haven't seen that. He's the perfect. He will complement the midfield so well, Dan. He's energetic, but it's not for the sake of it. It's not like Trezeguet running around like a headless chicken. He's effective in possession. 82% pass completion in the Bundesliga is not bad going for a 20-year-old at all. And he's been criticised for a limited range of passing, but Schalke have been very poor, so that has to be taken into consideration when you've got players like Douglas Luiz and John McGinn around you. You're going to be able to do them kind of outside of the boot passes that Douglas does and just be a bit more adventurous, likes to chip in with a goal and assist. And again, I could sit here all day and speak to you about how much I love Weston, Dan, and I know you could too.
Yeah, man, he's a one thing, because as I said, like if you guys want to hear all about the ins and outs of Weston, and I'm sure Dan, that podcast where we spoke about him in a bit more detail, you'll go up. And so for all plus 2,000 of you that listen to that podcast, I'm not going to go over it again twice. But now, one thing that I'm going to touch on, Dan, that we didn't mention the last time we spoke about him is the character and the personality that he is. I saw a few people touch on this today, and perhaps it's because he's from the US and stuff like that. But he's this really young, vibrant personality, someone that would really gel well in a dressing room where the lads get on really well. It seems to be a very humorous dressing room. John McGinn, I don't know if you've just seen his latest Instagram post where he's photoshopped his head onto that picture of Tyrone yesterday. These guys have a great sense of humour, and Weston's such a bubbly, lively personality, and he's such a great character. He seems to. I've watched his post-match interviews and stuff like that. He just seems to really relish the opportunity that he's been given. This young lad coming in from the States, allowed to play for a massive club like Schalke, playing in the Bundesliga, and he's just he fits the bill, not just in terms of his on-pitch profile, but the profile off it as well, which, as we've seen, mate, in past seasons where we've got that wrong and we haven't been signing the right personalities. The players have been right, but the personalities not so much. To think Jordan Veretout and the like, where they've clearly been good enough players, but they haven't fit into the club and they haven't been made to feel welcome and then can't showcase their best abilities. Weston, I don't think, would have that problem. He could make friends in a phone box, and so he's absolutely a player that if that fee that Southampton have tabled can be matched, and we can tempt him to the Villa, then you're right, mate. Patience is a virtue, but not where Weston McKennie's involved.
Absolutely, and there's a lot to be said as well about, as you say, I think it's often overlooked, isn't it? But how will they fit in the dressing room? It's really interesting because when you're as you'd know, playing Sunday League when you're a kid or whatever, you're doing it with your mates, so naturally there's going to be good banter there. You've either gone to school with them or you've been playing with them from such a young age that you're all just really good friends, and it must be difficult for players just getting dropped into these situations. He's left the US, where all of his friends and family, everything he knows, to go to Germany, a country where he doesn't speak the language, doesn't have anyone around him. So, for that in itself deserves a lot of plaudits. and is often overlooked, I'd say. But no, I'm just, again, I can't express how much I really want this transfer to go off as well. You've got to look at things from the commercial side as well. And Villa generally over the past 20 years have had an American in one of the sides. Michael Bradley, Brad Friedel, Brad Guzan. It's great to grow the brand. We had pre-season out in America last year. Could you imagine if, obviously with COVID, it can't happen, but if there was to be a pre-season tour, if McKennie was a part of that squad, the amount of Americans that would just go and watch, and it would just raise the profile of Aston Villa stateside. It makes sense on so many fronts. But I think that is where we'll leave the talk on Weston, because so we've kind of done it to death. But it's good to see so many other Villa fans that are on board with it as well. I'm not sure how many people have seen him, or if this is people going off my article, what other people have said about him. There's a lot of people like Tom Julian, Adam Glicks, who work for the Bundesliga, who are big Villa fans. Who share their knowledge as well, which is great. But yeah, so hopefully a deal can be made, a bid can be matched as well. In an update to another Bundesliga player, Milot Rashica, we filmed this podcast last time, and the minute we were done, the news broke that he didn't want a transfer to Aston Villa. Apparently, he said he didn't want to be involved in a relegation battle. So we were like, well, that's just bloody typical, isn't it? Because we've just done a whole podcast on him, and he's in the thumbnail, and I've edited it, and we're uploading it now. So, we ran with it, and it turned out that story was not true. It was an opinion piece which had been kind of twisted from a German journalist, and apparently he has handed in a transfer request. Again, we won't talk too much about what Rashica will offer. You guys all know that by now, but it's a development, so we'll keep you guys up to date. We're not in the know. We can't pretend like we are, because we're not. And if we were, you'd bet we'd be flaunting it on Twitter a lot more. Yeah. Definitely. And there was a few transfers have escaped me, so if there's any you can think of off the top of your head, Dan, that we've been linked with, please do say. But one thing that I saw in the comments, actually, similarly on the theme of Valencia, is someone suggested they'd like to take Jeffrey Kondogbia, which, I mean, what a signing that would be. Versatile player, can play at the back or in midfield. What do you think on that, Dan?
Well, yeah, my face says it all, mate. What a player, mate. A lot has been said of Thomas Partey at Atletico, those similar kind of those midfield engines, and the size and the physique of those players, both being well over 6 foot. And when you think of you signing your centre mids from La Liga, you think of your diminutive little pocket pickers and stuff like that, like the Danny Ceballos that we've seen come from La Liga. And I'll just touch on it briefly, but yeah, I mean, I think Kondogbia is up to it every bit as much as Partey. I actually think he's got a bit more of an engine. I think he's a more natural runner than Partey. And it's surprising that not more interest is being deflected in that way. I think, he made the decision to switch for the Congo over France a few years ago, which, looking back on it now, I don't suppose he would have thought he would be able to make the French side at the time, but he could definitely get in there now. But we've got to raid Valencia. If as I say, that last week is true, every Valencia player, apart from Jose Gaya, is up for sale. Then just move the whole Mestalla. Just shift it all over here. We'll have every single one of them.
Why not? Is there is there anyone who I've missed who we've been linked with, Dan? I should really know, but it's escaped me. I think we've pretty much covered base there.
My knowledge, I think. Just as I said, the business is slow. I think we will now start to see the forward movement of deals, because players are coming back from their holidays and stuff like that. And players, they've just had a long season. some of them, like, if you're playing for Wolves or other similar sides or anyone involved in Europe, your season's been lasting for well over a year now. They want to go away on holiday, forget about everything football. Just like anyone else in any line of work that's been affected and have had to work through lockdown. Shout out to my mum. They just need this break. So players will have had their agents' phones on silent, so to speak. They're now back in pre-season training. Football's on the brain. We can see who's coming back in decent fitness, who's coming back in injured. The European football scene is starting to gather momentum as we head towards that 12th of September kickoff date. This is when I think we'll start to see a bit more movement. And hopefully I'm right, mate, because with pre-season starting now, you don't want to be signing a player on the 7th, 8th, 9th of September. You want to get them into the squad, involved in some early kickabouts and stuff like that. But I think we'll probably see most of them happen behind closed doors. And I'm not just talking obviously at stadiums, but at Bodymore, I don't think we'll bother using stadiums and stuff like that. I think the friendlies will probably just be at Bodymore. Hopefully we can start to see a bit more movement of players. Villa fans, as I said, not in the know or anything like that, but logic would tell you that this last run up until the start of September is hopefully where we're going to see some business done.
Hopefully. I think that's a good note to end the podcast on, Dan. We've got to be patient, but Villa, strike while the iron's hot with Weston, McKennie. Please, that is me begging on my knees. Sign Weston. That is how we'll end the podcast today. Again, just like to reiterate how grateful Dan and I are for all the support that we've been getting on the channel. It really does make our day when we get so many comments from you guys. We've been reading them all, replying to as many as we can. So please do keep them coming in the comment section down below. Like the podcast if you enjoyed. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever your preferred podcast listening site is, leave a review, subscribe, follow, do what you can do on there for us, because it really does help us out. And we'll see you soon, hopefully with some more news on players next time. Up the Villa.
Jasper's essential. The ball filling this got potential. It's a main man, a hero. He's the main leader of the gang.